By late June 1944, the outcome on Saipan was no longer in doubt. The Japanese army had been shattered. Their airfields were gone, their tanks destroyed, and their communications severed. Yet, in the ruins of the island, isolated groups of soldiers still fought on, not for victory, but for honor. In the caves, fields, and ravines of Saipan, the war took on a desperate and human face. The Japanese soldiers, once the conquerors of Asia, now found themselves cut off, hunted, and surrounded by an enemy who outmatched them in every weapon and every resource. The 9th Tank Regiment, once Japan's proud armored force in the Pacific, now existed only in fragments. A few surviving Ha-Gos tanks, blackened and battered, were hidden deep in the jungle. Some had no fuel, others no ammunition. Their crews stayed near them out of duty, as if abandoning their tanks meant abandoning their honor. Many of these men had been trained since the early 1930s, veterans of China and the Philippines. But now the reality of modern war had caught up to them. Their thin armor, once enough to withstand rifle fire, was useless against American shells. Their 37mm guns, once deadly to infantry, could barely scratch a Sherman's surface. The Japanese tank crews had fought with astonishing bravery, but bravery could not pierce steel. American Marines advancing inland began encountering pockets of resistance where tanks had been turned into bunkers. Some Ha-Gos were buried in the ground up to their turrets, used as fixed gun positions. They waited silently until the last possible moment, then opened fire at close range. But each time the result was the same. The Shermans returned fire, and the Ha-Gos would vanish in a burst of flame and smoke. One Marine recalled, "We'd see them hidden behind brush or half dug into the dirt. They'd pop off a shot, but it didn't even dent our hulls. We'd fire one round, and it was over." Still, the Japanese fought on. For them, this was not just war, it was a test of will, a spiritual battle where surrender meant shame worse than death. By the 4th week of June, Japanese forces were cut into isolated pockets around Mount Tapochau and the northern cliffs. Colonel Iketa was presumed dead. Command had dissolved. The remaining tank crews were folded into infantry units, fighting as riflemen. Without supplies or reinforcements, they survived on whatever they could scavenge. A handful of rice, a canteen of water, sometimes nothing at all. Yet discipline remained. Many soldiers still saluted their officers, even in the darkness of the caves. For the Americans, the battle had shifted from open warfare to a grim, methodical sweep through tunnels, ravines, and fortifications. Every cave had to be cleared, every hill taken. The Marines called it mopping up. But for those inside, it was nothing short of a siege. The Battle of Saipan was more than just another victory in the Pacific. It was a revelation of what modern industrialized war truly meant. America's power did not lie only in its soldiers' courage. It lay in its ability to supply, replace, and rebuild endlessly. For every tank destroyed, 10 more stood ready. For every Marine wounded, there was another to take his place. Japan's courage was unbreakable, but its resources were not infinite. The Ha-Gos tanks were proof of that. Machines of another age, pitted against a world that had moved on. Technology, not spirit, now decided battles. Reports from Saipan shocked the Imperial High Command in Tokyo. Generals who had once believed in the superiority of Japanese arms now faced the truth. Their tanks had failed utterly against American armor. Still, propaganda at home spoke of glorious resistance, of Japanese tanks crushing invaders, of victories that never happened. The truth was buried beneath patriotic words, while the last defenders on Saipan prepared to die. American engineers, meanwhile, studied the wrecks scattered across the beaches. They took notes, measured armor thickness, and photographed the remains of the Ha-Gos. To them it was a technical curiosity. a museum piece compared to the machines rolling out of Detroit. By early July, organized Japanese resistance had ceased, but small groups of soldiers continued to fight on their own. Some ambushed Marine patrols with grenades and rifles. Others, trapped and wounded, chose to detonate their tanks rather than be captured. There were also those who simply waited in silence, sitting beside their burned-out machines until hunger or exhaustion claimed them. These scenes haunted many of the Marines who found them. Even hardened veterans felt a strange respect for men who fought so fiercely with so little. One American officer later said, "They didn't quit. Even when everything they had was gone, food, fuel, weapons, they still fought." You had to admire that, even as you pitied them. For Japan, Saipan was not just a military loss, it was a psychological one. It exposed the full extent of the empire's decline and the limits of fighting spirit in a world ruled by machines. The Type 95 Ha-Gos, once a symbol of Japanese ingenuity, had become the embodiment of that tragedy, a relic fighting a war it was never built for. The Battle of Saipan had proven one thing beyond doubt: courage could not replace steel, faith could not stop shells, and loyalty could not shield a nation from industrial might. By the time the battle ended, the American flag flew over Saipan's shattered cliffs. The victory came at a terrible cost, thousands of lives lost on both sides. But the lesson was clear. The modern age of war belonged to those who could build, supply, and sustain. Japan had entered the fight with warriors. America entered it with factories. And in that clash, the age of the samurai spirit gave way to the age of steel.